Hello, my name is Curtis Taylor, and I am going to present to you the XamDataGrid by Infragistics. The XamDataGrid is part of the WPF suite of controls called NetAdvantage. In this Visual Studio project, I have put together a window which displays a XamDataGrid. I've already added the DLLs here in the references section, which will allow you to work with the XamDataGrid. In the window of this project, I have already referenced the data presenter assembly, and I'm using the prefix IGDP to point to the Infragistics data presenter assembly here. I've also added local access to the current namespace so that I can assign a sample data view model which I created, and I have assigned it here to the resources section of the window so that this data will be instantiated as a singleton. Looking at my data, by switching to the sample data view model.cs file, you'll see that I've created a custom class which I have derived from observable collection. This collection contains a list of objects called sample data, which contains some sample properties. One of the properties, however, is a custom class itself called nameData, which contains 3 strings. And then the constructor for the view model is just simply generating some sample test data. So down here in the window grid, I have assigned a data context to point to the data that's already declared and instantiated here in the resource section. Using the prefix IGDP, I am accessing the XamDataGrid. I'm setting the background to transparent so that way I could still see the text that I have assigned here in the background. I've also assigned a field layout section to the XamDataGrid, which allows me to access fields individually. Without this part of it, everything would be assigned for us. Here I have assigned the field name to have an override label called full name. I've also set the minimum width and the width for the cell to 200 for the name property. Now, since I've already created the data and added it to the data context, I could simply set the data source property of the XamDataGrid to a binding, and that's all I have to do. Since the data is declared here in the XAML itself, the data will show up here all by itself. Now the thing is, as you can see here for full name field, the XamDataGrid doesn't know how to present the name class. It does know how to present the Boolean value and the integer value by creating editors that work with those types. If I were to run it, you would see that the Boolean, for a Boolean, the XamDataGrid assigns check editors. For an integer, a numeric editor is assigned. For this type, a read-only string was assigned because toString on the object is being called, since XamDataGrid doesn't know how to present this data. So to present that data in a way that makes sense, we would add a cell value presenter. I've already created a cell value presenter here with a style. This way I can set the control template for the cell value and present the data any way I want. Within this control template, which is targeting the cell value presenter, which is being set to the value of my setter and my style, I have added a border. The border is using template binding to get its properties from the parent class, which is communicated through the templating mechanism. And here I've added a stack panel horizontally. Width and height is also set here. And I have 3 text blocks which point to the first, middle, and last properties of the data that is being assigned to this cell. So the data is being assigned through the property called cell, through the data, the data is coming in through a property called content, which is inherent of the grid. The dot first, dot middle, dot last point to my data. And the source is through the templated parent. So it knows how to get the source. So down here, all I have to do is assign that style to the cell value presenter style property. Using the syntax for resources, I simply declare a static resource, and then I add the name of that style, and that should be all I need to do. So if I run it or compile it, you'll see the change happen in the interface. So here we see that my name is now split up into 3 read-only text blocks, which are formatted the way I wish. Since this is the first property, when I scroll it, it displays my cell in the tooltip. And of course, keep in mind the cell value presenter lets you customize the data for any cell in a grid. So this is something you can easily add yourself for any grid within a data grid. Thank you.
Infragistics. On the web at infragistics.com.